Welcome to Empathy Stories, the channel where we share inspiring tales of courage, resilience, and transformation. Today's story takes us inside the boardroom and beyond, as a fearless CEO uncovers shocking truths about her own company. What happens next is a powerful testament to the strength of leadership driven by empathy. It was a bitterly cold Christmas Eve in Redwood Falls, a small, picturesque town nestled in the heart of Oregon. The snow fell gently, covering the town in a soft, pristine blanket, and the holiday decorations sparkled under the streetlights. It was the kind of place where every window glowed with warmth. Every corner seemed alive with the quiet magic of the season. Yet, amidst the cheer, Mary Turner stood behind the counter of her modest diner, Mary's Cafe, feeling the weight of the world pressing on her shoulders. The diner was a comforting refuge for many in town, a place where locals gathered for coffee and conversation. Tonight, however, the cafe was nearly empty. A few regulars sat scattered at the tables, their low murmurs blending with the soft hum of Christmas carols playing from the old jukebox in the corner. The smell of freshly brewed coffee and cinnamon rolls lingered in the air, a small comfort against the icy wind outside. Mary wiped down the counter absent-mindedly, her hands moving out of habit. Her mind, however, was far from the present moment. Business had been slow for weeks, and the stack of bills on her kitchen table at home seemed to grow taller every day. She had poured everything she had into this little diner over the years. But tonight, it felt like her efforts were barely enough to keep her afloat. Her stomach growled softly, a reminder that she hadn't eaten since morning. She glanced at the brown paper bag sitting on the counter beside her, a simple sandwich and an apple she had brought from home. It wasn't much, but it was all she could manage for herself. As she reached for the sandwich, the bell above the door jingled softly, announcing the arrival of a new customer. Mary looked up, startled, and saw a young boy standing hesitantly in the doorway. He couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old, his small frame wrapped in a tattered coat far too thin for the weather. His messy hair poked out from beneath a knitted cap, and his wide, wary eyes darted around the room. Mary felt a pang of sympathy as she took in his appearance. His cheeks were flushed red from the cold, and the hunger in his expression was unmistakable. He didn't say a word as he stood there, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, his feet shifting nervously. "Hey there," Mary called out gently, her voice warm and inviting. "You okay, sweetheart?" The boy hesitated, his eyes flicking toward an abandoned plate of fries on a nearby table. His gaze lingered there for a moment before he shook his head and mumbled, "I'm just looking." Mary's heart ached. She recognized the look on his face, the same look she had worn as a child, growing up in a family that struggled to make ends meet. She set down her rag and walked around the counter, crouching down to his level. "You hungry?" she asked softly. The boy hesitated again, his small fingers fiddling with the edge of his coat. Finally, he nodded, his eyes filled with both shame and hope. Mary smiled gently. "Well, you're in luck," she said, standing up and grabbing the paper bag from the counter. "I just so happen to have an extra sandwich and an apple. What do you say?" The boy's face lit up with surprise. "Really? You'd give that to me?" "Of course," Mary replied, handing him the bag. "Everyone needs a little help sometimes. Go on, eat up." The boy took the bag with trembling hands, his gratitude evident in his wide, bright smile. He sat down at a nearby table and began eating, his small bites growing larger as the initial hesitation faded. Mary watched him from behind the counter, her chest tightening with a mix of emotions. She didn't have much to give, but in that moment, it felt like she had done something right. The bell above the door jingled again, and Mary looked up to see a tall man step into the diner. He was dressed sharply in a navy suit and wool coat, his polished shoes leaving faint imprints in the snow that had dusted the floor. His confident demeanor immediately caught Mary's attention. He looked out of place in her little cafe, as though he had stepped out of a different world entirely. "Evening," the man greeted as he approached the counter, his deep voice carrying an air of quiet authority. "Could I get a black coffee?" "Please." "Coming right up," Mary said, quickly pouring a fresh cup. As she handed it to him, She noticed his gaze shift toward the boy, who was finishing the last bite of the sandwich. "Is that your son?" the man asked, his tone curious. Mary shook her head. "No, just someone who needed a meal." The man raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "Not many people would do that these days," he remarked. "It's nice to see." Mary shrugged, brushing off the compliment. "Someone did it for me once," she said simply, just paying it forward. The man studied her for a moment, a faint smile playing at the corners of his lips. "That's admirable," he said finally. "We could use more people like you." Mary didn't know how to respond, so she busied herself with cleaning the counter. The man sipped his coffee in silence, occasionally glancing around the room. He seemed to be waiting for something, though Mary couldn't imagine what it might be. Finally, he stood to leave, pulling out a crisp $50 bill and placing it on the counter. "For the coffee and for the kindness," he said, his tone sincere. Mary blinked in surprise. "This is too much," she protested, trying to hand it back. The man shook his head. "Keep it. Consider it a Christmas gift." Before Mary could argue further, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. He slid it across the counter, his expression suddenly serious. "I'm Nathan Brooks," he said. "I run a nonprofit organization called Hope for All. We're looking to expand, and I think you might be just the kind of person we need." Mary stared at the card in disbelief, her heart pounding. "Me? But I'm just a waitress." Nathan smiled, his eyes warm. "You're more than that, Mary. You have heart, and that's what matters most. Think about it. If you're interested, give me a call." And with that, he turned and walked out into the snowy night, leaving Mary standing there with the card in her hand and a whirlwind of questions in her mind. As the boy finished his meal and waved goodbye, Mary couldn't shake the feeling that something extraordinary had just happened. She glanced down at the card again, the bold letters "Hope for All" staring back at her. It felt like a lifeline, a chance to turn her struggles into something meaningful. For the first time in years, Mary felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this Christmas would be different after all. The following morning, Mary awoke to the soft glow of winter sunlight streaming through her small apartment window. Outside, the snow-covered streets of Redwood Falls looked like a scene from a Christmas postcard. But inside, Mary sat at her modest kitchen table, staring at Nathan Brooks' business card. The bold letters seemed to taunt her as she turned the card over in her fingers. Her mind was a whirl of doubt. What did a nonprofit leader see in her? She was just a diner owner barely scraping by. The thought of taking on a role at an organization like Hope for All felt absurd. And yet, Nathan's words lingered in her mind. "You have heart, and that's what matters most." As the morning stretched on, Mary couldn't shake the feeling that the card in her hand was more than just a piece of paper. It was a door, one that might lead to something bigger than the life she had resigned herself to. With a deep breath, she picked up her phone and dialed the number. The line rang twice before a calm, professional voice answered. "Hope for All. This is Nathan Brooks." Mary hesitated for a moment, her nerves threatening to get the better of her. "Hi, Mr. Brooks. This is Mary Turner. We met yesterday at my diner." Nathan's tone immediately warmed. "Mary, I was hoping you'd call. I know it's a lot to consider, but I'm glad you're giving it some thought. I'm still not sure if I'm the right person for what you're offering," Mary admitted, her voice unsteady. "But I'd like to hear more." Nathan chuckled softly. "That's all I ask. Can you come to our office in Portland tomorrow morning? I'll have my assistant send you the details." Mary agreed, her heart pounding as she hung up the phone. She had taken the first step, but the uncertainty still loomed large. Could she really step into a world so far removed from her own? The thought made her stomach churn, but a small voice inside urged her forward. The next morning, Mary woke early, donning the best outfit she could put together: a simple gray skirt, a white blouse, and a wool coat she had kept in good condition over the years. It wasn't glamorous, but it was clean and presentable. As she boarded the bus to Portland, the hum of the engine and the quiet conversations around her did little to calm her nerves. The city was bustling when she arrived. Towering buildings lined the streets, their glass windows reflecting the pale winter sky. The Hope for All office was located in a sleek, modern building downtown, Mary hesitated at the entrance, staring up at the imposing structure. It felt so far removed from the warmth of her little diner, and she wondered again if she had made a mistake. But she pushed the thought aside and stepped through the glass doors. Inside, the lobby was pristine and bustling with activity. A friendly receptionist greeted her and escorted her to the top floor, where Nathan's office was located. When the elevator doors opened, Mary found herself in a bright, open space with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city. Nathan was waiting for her, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit. He rose from his desk as she entered, his smile putting her somewhat at ease. "Mary, it's so good to see you. Thank you for coming." Mary shook his hand, her nerves easing slightly. "Thank you for inviting me. This is all a bit overwhelming." Nathan gestured for her to sit in one of the plush chairs across from his desk. "I can imagine, but I wouldn't have asked you here if I didn't believe in your potential." He slid a folder across the desk toward her. Inside were detailed descriptions of the nonprofit's programs, food banks, job training initiatives, housing assistance, and more. The scope of the work was staggering, and Mary felt a mix of awe and intimidation as she flipped through the pages. "Our mission," Nathan explained, "is to provide not just immediate aid, but long-term solutions. We want to empower people to rebuild their lives, not just survive. And I think you'd be perfect to lead our new Portland branch." Mary's eyes widened. "Me? But I don't have any experience running something like this. I'm just a diner owner." "You're more than that," Nathan said firmly. "You have empathy, determination, and a deep understanding of what it means to struggle. That's more valuable than any degree. The skills you need, you'll learn. But the heart for this work, that can't be taught. And you already have it." Mary's throat tightened with emotion. She had spent so many years doubting her worth, scraping by just to make ends meet. To hear someone believe in her so completely felt almost surreal. "What would I even do as a branch leader?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You'd oversee programs, coordinate with volunteers, and connect with the community." Nathan explained. "But more than that, you'd be the face of the branch, a leader who inspires trust and hope." Mary sat back in her chair, the weight of the decision settling over her. She thought of the boy she had helped at the diner, his hungry eyes and shy gratitude. She thought of her own struggles, the nights she had gone to bed hungry as a child, and the people who had shown her kindness when she needed it most. After a long moment, she looked up at Nathan. "If I do this, it's because I want to make a real difference, not just handing out food, but helping people find a way forward." Nathan smiled, his eyes filled with approval. "That's exactly what I hoped you'd say." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Mary dove headfirst into her new role, learning everything she could about the organization and its programs. The learning curve was steep, but Nathan and his team were there to guide her every step of the way. For the first time in years, Mary felt a sense of purpose that went beyond simply surviving. One of her first major projects was organizing a holiday food drive. It was a daunting task, but Mary approached it with the same determination she had always brought to running her diner. She reached out to local businesses for donations, rallied volunteers, and spent countless hours coordinating the logistics. As the weeks passed, the community began to rally around her efforts. Donations poured in, and the list of volunteers grew longer by the day. Mary felt a swell of pride every time she walked into the office and saw the stacks of food, clothes, and toys waiting to be distributed. On the day of the food drive, Mary stood outside the distribution center, greeting families as they arrived. She watched as children's faces lit up at the sight of the toys, as parents breathed sighs of relief when they received boxes of food. It was a humbling experience, and Mary couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude for the path that had brought her here. That evening, as Mary returned home, she found herself reflecting on how much her life had changed in such a short time. The doubts that had once held her back were fading, replaced by a quiet confidence. She was no longer just a diner owner struggling to get by. She was a leader, a helper, a source of hope. As she sat by her small Christmas tree, her phone buzzed with a message from Nathan. "You're doing amazing work. Mary, I'm proud of you." Mary smiled, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and humility. This journey was far from over, but for the first time in years, she felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. The weeks leading up to Christmas were a whirlwind for Mary. Her role at Hope for All was more demanding than she could have ever imagined. But with each passing day, she grew more confident in her abilities. The holiday season brought an outpouring of generosity from the community, and Mary found herself at the center of a movement that was transforming lives, including her own. On Christmas Eve, the culmination of months of hard work came together in the form of a grand event, a community Christmas gala, held at a beautifully decorated venue in downtown Portland. The gala was both a celebration of the organization's success and a fundraiser to expand their efforts further. Mary had been instrumental in organizing the event, and as the evening approached, she felt a mixture of excitement and nerves. Dressed in an elegant navy gown that Nathan's assistant had helped her pick out, Mary arrived at the venue just as the final preparations were being made. The grand ballroom was a sight to behold, with twinkling lights, towering Christmas trees, and tables adorned with festive centerpieces. Volunteers bustled around, ensuring every detail was perfect. Nathan greeted her warmly as she entered. "You look incredible, Mary," he said, his eyes filled with genuine admiration. "Tonight is your night. Everything you've done has led to this moment." Mary smiled, though her heart was racing. "Thank you, Nathan. I couldn't have done it without your guidance." He shook his head. "You give me too much credit. This is all you. Just wait until you see the impact you've made." As the guests began to arrive, the room buzzed with energy. Families who had been helped by Hope for All mingled with donors and volunteers, sharing their stories of triumph and gratitude. Mary moved through the crowd, greeting people and listening to their experiences. Each story reminded her why she had taken this leap of faith, why she had chosen to leave behind the familiarity of her diner to embrace a new path. One story in particular touched her deeply. A woman named Clara approached Mary with tears in her eyes, holding the hand of her young son. "Miss Turner," Clara began, her voice trembling, "I don't know how to thank you. Because of the job training program, I've been able to find steady work. My son and I finally have a place to call home." Mary's eyes filled with tears as she embraced Clara. "You're the one who made it happen," she said softly. "You had the strength to keep going. I'm just glad we could help." Clara smiled through her tears. "You gave us hope when we had none. That's something I'll never forget." As the evening continued, Mary couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by the outpouring of love and support. But the most pivotal moment of the night came when Nathan called her to the stage to deliver her speech. The crowd quieted as Mary approached the microphone, her heart pounding in her chest. She took a deep breath and looked out at the sea of faces before her, some familiar, some new, all united by a shared purpose. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice steady despite the emotion bubbling beneath the surface. "Tonight, we come together not just to celebrate the work we've done, but to recognize the strength and resilience of the people we serve." Mary paused, her eyes scanning the room. "A year ago, I was running a small diner in a tiny town. I was struggling to make ends meet, unsure of what my future held. But then I met someone, a little boy who reminded me of myself at his age. Hungry, scared, but full of hope. That encounter changed everything for me." Her voice wavered slightly as she continued. "I realized that even the smallest act of kindness can spark a chain reaction. It can change lives in ways we might never imagine. That's what brought me here, and that's what drives everything we do at Hope for All." The crowd listened intently, many dabbing at their eyes as Mary shared her story. She spoke of the families they had helped, the programs they had launched, and the incredible generosity of the community. But she also spoke of the work that still needed to be done. "Tonight, I'm proud to announce that we're expanding our efforts," Mary said, her voice filled with determination. "Next year, Hope for All will launch new programs in 3 additional cities: Seattle, Los Angeles, and Denver. Together, we will continue to build a brighter future for families in need." The room erupted in applause, and Mary felt a surge of pride. She had come so far, from the struggling diner owner to a leader of change. And now, she was paving the way for even greater impact. As the gala wound down, Mary found herself standing by the large windows overlooking the city skyline. The snow was falling gently, blanketing Portland in a peaceful hush. Nathan joined her, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "To you," he said, raising his glass, "for your courage, your compassion, and your unwavering belief in the power of kindness." Mary clinked her glass against his, a smile tugging at her lips. "To all of us. This wouldn't have been possible without the team, the volunteers, and everyone who believed in the mission." Nathan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You've shown me what true leadership looks like. Mary, it's not about titles or experience. It's about heart, and you have more of that than anyone I've ever met." The two stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Watching the snow fall, Mary felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Later that night, as Mary returned to her modest apartment, she found a small package waiting for her on the doorstep. Inside was a handmade ornament, a simple wooden star tied with a red ribbon. A note accompanied it, written in a child's careful handwriting. "Thank you for giving us hope. Merry Christmas, Jamie and Clara." Tears filled Mary's eyes as she held the ornament in her hands. It was a reminder of how far she had come, and of the lives she had touched along the way. She hung the star on her small Christmas tree, the twinkling lights reflecting off its surface. As she sat by the tree, sipping a cup of tea and watching the snow fall outside, Mary felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. This journey had been unexpected, challenging, and at times, overwhelming, but it had also been the most rewarding experience of her life. That Christmas Eve, Mary made a silent promise to herself to continue the work she had started, to keep believing in the power of kindness, and to never forget the boy who had set her on this path. Her life was no longer defined by struggle. It was defined by purpose, hope, and the endless possibilities of a brighter future. And for the first time in years, Mary felt truly at peace. Merry Christmas to all, and may the spirit of kindness guide us all in the year ahead. Thank you for joining us on this unforgettable journey of justice, redemption, and transformation. Charlotte's courage to confront the toxic culture within her company reminds us that true leadership lies in standing up for what's right, no matter the cost. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to Empathy Stories for more inspirational narratives. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Where are you watching from today? Until next time, remember that every act of courage and compassion has the power to create lasting change.